Right, okay, so this is Steve. This is Dr. Steve Rogers from GGE. We're co-presenting today on the title you've given, thank you very much, on immersive and augmented learning environments. Steve is at the moment in Manchester at an advanced HE conference, and him being remote and being able to deliver the presentation with me is part of the ideas we have and the proposal we have. Okay, so Steve, do you want to run the presentation?
Let's see if I can get it going.
Bizarre. There we go.
There we go.
Excellent. Okay, so our bit, if you like, is more a presentation or a call to action, really, about how we can transform how we interact and how we engage our students, how we engage students who cannot make it onto campus, how we can engage partners globally, internationally, or just in different parts of the campus. By sort of experimenting and using the technologies we already have. So in that sense, it doesn't cost much really, but of course we need to attach sort of manpower or person power to that sort of. So first of all, I want to just mention how one second. It's the thank you. Just taking control.
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. So a digital space or digital learning environment. There's lots of definitions of it, but for me, a workable one is an integrated digital space where learners can communicate, store and manage content, co-author and discuss. So, for example, natural sort of thoughts will naturally go to VLE, so in our case, the KIITE, Google Classroom, even Slack and those kind of platforms, where we can interact with students, we can sort of give them materials to read, interact with, and sort of pass them feedback and assignments, etc. But my sort of our thoughts mainly around the integrated word here, in that it presents an environment where all of this goes on sort of inside the environment. So everything's interconnected. Students or members of staff don't have to sort of open other windows or access other resources to do something or to point students out into. So it's all happening inside this sort of this one environment. So where we are in technology and with sort of lots of assumptions and requirements and desires from students, these spaces are becoming more commonplace, and there's probably a kind of we should be more motivated, I suppose, as an industry, as a sector, to be sort of producing these environments and to getting students sort of engaged and online. So anybody here who's used the KIITE, for example, I'm not sure about your levels of experience or engagement or how happy you are with it, but I know that it's sort of it can certainly do some work in terms of sort of keeping students engaged with the course content, providing spaces where students can collaborate and talk and break out into activity sort of groups. So I'm thinking that more mindfully done, these spaces could sort of be used to address retention, engagement, certainly accessibility issues, and also impact on the living environment also. So I know when I used to work at other universities, we had sites all around the northwest. If you want to have a meeting at a different site, you jump in the car on a train and you travel there. With the likes of Microsoft Teams or Google Hangouts, etc., we don't need that anymore. We don't need to be travelling around and sort of using fossil fuels. We can simply sit at our desk and engage sort of our research partners and students, sort of like that. So today we're proposing a digital space which is really considered, but we believe could be a great benefit to a huge variety of people and purposes. And that is creating a virtual conference space, if you like. So virtual spaces built for conferences, framed as areas of collaboration, exploration and dissemination. So, for example, today what we've rigged up, which we'll show you later, we've rigged up today's entire conference inside of this platform. And the idea is that, because if people can't sort of make it to this stream because they're watching other great presentations, they can pop into the environment, they can look at presentations, they can ask questions, and we can interact with each other, sort of all. It's good stuff. There's already a few of these places. So I know that there's some sort of virtual archaeology sort of seminars and conferences. So instead of people having to sort of travel across the world to attend these things, you can just log into one of these digital spaces and still interact with their colleagues for activities, answer questions, etc. So these spaces have many potential benefits, including, and so I'll pass over to Steve hopefully.
So hopefully, hello everybody, hopefully you can hear me. So this is, I suppose, part of the plan, if you like. So the idea being, I'm in Manchester today, but I'm still able to present and participate within the conference at Keele. And some of the potential benefits we can sort of perceive of these sorts of spaces, particularly conferences, are those listed up on the screen so that you can hopefully see. So accessibility, inclusivity, legacy, and sustainability. And I'll go through those separately as they are. Now, not only are these benefits of potential use for staff, so when we're researching, we do scholarly work, we want to disseminate, but it's also a way of potentially bringing students into conferences that they might not previously thought they could attend, or they can attend, or they even want to attend. So we'll just go through some of our perceived sort of benefits of these spaces first. So the first one, accessibility. Now, conferences can be quite exclusionary, so there are some conferences that are incredibly expensive, they're far away, whatever it might be. So, well, the first proposal is that these conferences, these digital conferences, and we're not saying here, we're not advocating for a removal of physical conferences, this is just a space that sits alongside a physical conference. So, for example, the KIITE conference today could have a digital space as well as the physical space that you are all in now. So one of the benefits could be for people that can't attend the conference, like me. So I can't attend today, but luckily I'll be able to see several of the conference slides, at least, through the digital space me and Karl have put together. It could be that you're teaching today, so it's teaching at Keele today, so many of our colleagues might not be able to come along just because of the fact that they've got sessions, whatever it might be. We can engage with parallel sessions, so me and Karl have been incredibly lucky that the 3 parallel sessions that are running now, Julie, Kizzy and Rich, they've actually given us their slides, and those slides exist in our digital conference space. So if you want to see those talks, you can at least see the slides, ask questions, and hopefully collaborate and ask questions of the individuals that were giving those. It can be useful for those that can't travel, and that could be for whatever reason, whether it be cost or distance or ethical reasons or anything along those lines. It might be a useful source for folks that can't afford conferences. So if you don't have funding for it, some conferences, I say, can be incredibly expensive. So this could be a way of providing a cheaper alternative. So we're not suggesting that it's a free-for-all and anyone can enter these spaces. You still have to register. Perhaps there's a much lower registration fee, for example. It can be useful for those who have work or caring responsibilities, and those individuals that have things like imposter syndrome or are really anxious, don't like going to spaces with people, don't like network. I don't like networking particularly, to be quite honest. I find it quite stressful, but this would be a space where I'd be happy to network in, so I can ask questions, answer questions, basically in my own time, rather than being forced to do a lift conversation or whatever it's called. And in terms of, we're talking about a conference, but in terms of wider spaces of these digital areas, we think this might really be useful for the sort of Keele vision of education, and particularly when we're looking at the access and participation plan as well. So some of these ideas could really transfer over into spaces that allow carers, for example, to come to a degree. So the next is inclusivity. And this is a two-sided one. I suppose some people absolutely love physical conferences, other people don't particularly like them. So it would just be an area that those individuals might be more comfortable to sort of work in, meet people, ask questions, particularly if they're asking questions that they might not feel comfortable asking in front of others or to the individual in face. It could benefit individuals that want to, like me, present virtually, so I could have prepared a video, or I could, as I'm doing now, stream live to you, so you can have individuals potentially from across the globe presenting at your conferences. But that also means, if it is done digitally, that you can have subtitles included on talks, and you can turn them into audio files as well, so we can turn them into these slides, for example, into audio files that others might find more accessible and inclusive. And I'll go on to the sort of digital repository a bit more in a second, but it would also mean that you could have all of the slides available for a far wider audience. So just mine and Karl's little example we've got set up today already opens up some of the sessions that you wouldn't be able to see because you're sat in this session to you guys, but it would also open up to far wider, so you can invite individuals from other institutes. This is all about sharing our best practice today. You know, we could share it much wider, perhaps even more effectively than we are now. The next practical sort of positive that we can see from this is a sustainability stance. So as academics, we do travel quite a lot for conferences, and some of those conferences involve a lot of travel, so they could be, you know, continental, around the globe, and the reason we might be travelling is to give a 10-minute or a 15-minute talk. And yes, we can all argue that our work is incredibly important and groundbreaking, the best thing ever. I think we've got to the stage where we've got to look honestly at what we're presenting and what we're doing when we attend some of these international conferences. By providing a digital route to some of those conferences, it might be a really ethical way of allowing us to attend conferences that we might not want to attend for reasons of cutting down carbon footprint, for example. And it might actually mean that in the end you can attend more international conferences because you can go to several rather than perhaps just the one that you want to go to in that particular year. So this is perhaps one of the bigger appeals, I suppose, and bigger positives, is that it could really help us cut down on carbon footprints whilst still doing the great work and the networking we need to do as academics. And another one is something that is sort of done at the moment, and this is legacy of conferences. So at the moment we quite often have an abstract volume, and the abstract, of course, is usually the proposal that's submitted to the conference. And what happens is the talk is usually much more involved, it's much more in depth than any of those conference abstracts are, and so you don't usually get a full view or full feel of what the individuals are trying to talk about when they're actually presenting. So this would be a way of collecting and potentially sort of curating conferences into a digital space. So you could use it after the conference, so conference goers could come back onto the site and ask each other questions once they've gone home or after the conference, or it could be years later, you think, oh, I think I've seen that idea before somewhere, go back to the conference and then start to network a bit more with whoever it might have been that actually ran that particular session. So legacy could be built up into quite an important, impactful way of sharing conference material and building those networks and collaborations. And of course, there's going to be negatives as well. So we're not just saying that this is going to be the most fantastic of use of everyone's time and effort. So some of the negatives we can sort of think of include lack of engagement. So it might mean perhaps people don't ask as many questions because they know they can ask them online, so you lose a little bit of that to and forth in the sort of physical space. It might mean that there's a bit of less networking potentially physically, because again, people know that they might be able to network digitally, but let's face it, lots of people that go to conferences just meet up with their buddies that they haven't seen for a while and stand in little groups and talk to their friends anyway, so it might be a way of sort of breaking some of those barriers down anyway. But lack of engagement was one negative we pulled out. The impact on attendance, so of course we wouldn't want everybody just to turn up into the digital space, we want them to turn up into the real space as well, otherwise there's no point in having some of these conferences, so it has to be something that would be looked into and worked upon. And I think most importantly perhaps is the sort of human element of it. So we make friends at conferences, we have a laugh, we engage with people, we do what people do, you know, we have human moments, and potentially by relying on digital conferences, you would take away some of those human moments. So again, the idea would be that we're not encouraging this to be a standalone thing, it would be as a sort of a side to the physical conference itself. And it would potentially mean that you could have fewer, I suppose, non-discipline specific conversations with people in terms of the human moment. So you wouldn't necessarily ask people how their cat was or something like that. You'd focus more on the discipline stuff whilst you're there in the sort of the digital space. So those are, and I'm sure everyone can think of more negatives. Another one, of course, would be things like Wi-Fi signal. So I'm hoping everybody's been able to hear me okay today, but that's down to the gods of Wi-Fi. So there are other issues around digital and sort of digital connectivity as well. So, sort of to summarise this, we have the, as Karl said, we sort of have the technology sort of at hand that we can create these spaces. So this is done in Microsoft Teams if nobody's seen Microsoft Teams before. And we do encourage you to come along to the carousel and perhaps have a look at it. It does take a little bit of getting used to, but Karl will be on hand to help you with some of that. And we think that this sort of space needs further exploration. So again, we're not saying roll out now, it's fantastic, but it would be an idea to work behind and perhaps have some real scholarly work done on these areas to try and identify what is the best practice in creating these digital environments. How do we better enable people to engage and contribute and actually talk to people, network? That's what these things are all about. So that's sort of our pitch, and as we alluded to, this is very much a proof of concept, if you like. So this talk is adjunct to our carousel, and I'll hand you back over to Karl to give you a little bit of info about the carousel and basically what you need to do when you come along to the carousel to join us online later.
Thanks, Steve. You still there? Hello?
Yeah,
thanks very much. I'll take control back now if you don't mind.
Yeah.
Right, so can you... Okay, so I'll, just to finish off, I'll now put the phone down on you, okay?
Bye!
And I'll show people, those who can't make the carousel, I've got a minute left? I'll show folks who can't make the carousel very quickly how we've laid out our virtual conference, okay? So thanks very much, thank you.
Goodbye!
Goodbye. Right. Okay. That's actually quite good, wasn't that, call quality? I'll dismiss that as well. Okay, so, oh, by the way, I could also have recorded this whole session we've done here now, and what it'll do is, the recording will have been pushed back into the Teams conversation basically as an MP4 video. So this is pretty much what we've set up. So you can see we've created these, they're called channels, to represent each of the themes across the left here. And so if you go into the student voice as a driver, for example, so here we've got the presentation by Kizzy Beaumont et al. And so this here presentation, and then to the right here, there's an area whereby anybody who's part of the team can ask questions. So you can say to Kizzy, hey Kizzy, that slide is great, have you thought of this, this and this, okay? And it's all contained in this area, it's going nowhere, so after, in terms of sustainability, as Steve pointed out, months later, the team will still be here, so you can still go back and reference what you've said. Somebody says something really interesting you've forgotten, it's all still there, as well. Oh, sorry, thank you. As well as all the videos, all the content, etc. So quickly back to our... Also, you can drop interesting things like, for example, I just dropped an activity in there. Microsoft Form. There are lots of components and different sorts of programs that are now sort of native and default add-ins for the Teams environment. This one, if all you guys had the QR code or whatever, you could answer this, submit, and then towards the end of the talk, I could show you a chart saying you guys thought this, you thought this, etc., etc. Okay. So I'll finish off now. It comes to carousel later. If you'd like to chat more about it, and I can show you more about what we're doing with Teams at Keele. Okay. Thank you.